Hey everybody, it's Trey here with you today. Welcome to the season finale of the Animal Liberation Hour, where we seek insight from animal rights and liberation activists around the world so that we can think, reflect, learn, and be inspired. I can't believe we've already done another 10 episodes. It feels like it has just flown by. We've had so many amazing guests this season, and I'm really excited for our season finale to interview someone who really helped me along my activism journey, who's been a mentor and a friend to me for several years now, Shannon Blair. Shannon and I talked about being a vegan mom, being the mom of animal rights activists. We also talked about unseen activism and much, much more. I really can't wait for you to hear what Shannon had to say about a variety of different topics. Before we get into the interview, I just want to remind you that the Animal Liberation Hour is a podcast by Animal Activism Mentorship. AAM's mission is to grow and strengthen the animal rights movement by providing a space for activists to have access to a community and educational resources. From one-on-one mentorship to free workshops and trainings to this podcast, AAM aims to empower humans to take action for animals so that the world will have more activists and we can achieve liberation sooner. For more information, visit animalactivismmentorship.com or our linktree, which you can find in the show notes. On the linktree, you can sign up for a free mentor, donate so that we can continue this work, and keep up with everything AAM. Shannon has been an activist for many years, and she is a legend, in my opinion, in the animal rights movement. Buckle in for the 2-hour season finale, my interview with Shannon Blair. Welcome, Shannon Blair, to the Animal Liberation Hour.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we get started, I want to thank you for the enormous impact you've had on me and my activism journey. I looked up to you from afar when I first became an activist, and then had the honor of doing activism alongside of you, and you encouraged me to do my first speak out and my first disruption. And I know a lot of other people would have that same experience with you, with you helping them along. So you were, before AAM was a thing, you were already mentoring people. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and express my appreciation.
Oh, that means so much to me. I am honored to be alongside you and all of the other amazing activists. That really, really means a lot to me.
Yeah, that was formative years in my activism journey. But yeah, tell us about your journey in becoming vegan and an activist. Like, how did it all start? Where did it all start?
Oh boy. So I've always loved animals, and I've always cared about trying to do what I could to help them. So my mom really taught me to be kind and empathetic from as far back as I can remember. Things like we'd go to a pool party and we would set up paper towel hospitals. And I love to swim, but I'd spend half the time there trying to save the drowning ants and bees. And we'd get really excited when somebody would come to and fly away. It was things like that. And I would go visit the county fairs. I love to visit the fairs because I love to see the goats and the cows and the pigs and everybody. I had no idea back then what was going on, and that they were all going to auction and all. But it just took me finding out what was happening. My cousin showed me a video when I was 9 years old, and that was it. I never ate another animal again. And luckily she had some resources because she was in college at the time and had done like a tiny bit of activism. And so she told me about PETA. PETA started sending me some things, or maybe she passed along things to me. And also Farm Animal Rights Movement had sent me different posters and literature to hand out way back in the 90s. So that was really, I just found out information and stopped what I knew to stop at the time. I had no idea about the dairy and egg industries back then. But yeah, I stopped eating animals over 26 years ago. This Thanksgiving makes 27 years. And I went on not eating animals and speaking up for animals for the next 19 years while I unintentionally participated in a lot of violence because I consumed so much dairy. So then again, I found out information. Someone told me that I was supporting some really horrible things, that I was a hypocrite for being a vegetarian, and that I was supporting rape and kidnapping. And I really had no idea what she was talking about. I was really, really offended. She wasn't vegetarian or vegan herself, so I knew she was trying to be mean, but what she said, it was so shocking, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. So I looked it up, and I found out that she was right. And so I, again, stopped participating. And at this point, I really, really felt compelled, because I'm like, no one knows this information. Like, especially with the dairy industry, who would think that we are forcibly impregnating animals, starting when they're 1-year-old baby girls, and doing these horrible things, taking their babies away from them just to steal breast milk that we don't need, that's bad for us. That's 65% of our American population is lactose intolerant. And so like it's literally making people sick. So when I found all this out, and it's hurting the planet that, we all share, I had Evan at the time, and I started getting really, really scared because I'm hearing information from incredible people like Dr. Sailesh Rao about the 6th great mass extinction of species on Earth, and what animal agriculture is doing. And I had written about some of these things back in college when I was a vegetarian, but now I was finding out the extent of things, how bad things were. So that's really it. Once I know that was a really long answer, but once I found out more information and I understood, I have just really been nonstop trying ever since to make the world a better place, to educate people so that they can make better decisions, hopefully. I don't know why it's so hard for people to do that.
Yeah, and all that was going on, really it's hard now because it's so ingrained in our lives, but that was really a time that the internet was around, but it was not what it was or what it is today. It was not, there was no social media. There were chat rooms and forums and things like that back in that day. But yeah, it sounds like you mostly got your information from other people, like word of mouth, and then literature from PETA and Farm. And you talked about how, even though your mom wasn't vegan back then, maybe because she just didn't know yet about what happens to animals, she still really instilled this, deep compassion in you. And maybe part of it you were just born with, and part of it your mom helped along, but now you're a mom, and I would love to know, well, I know that Evan, your firstborn, helped you go vegan, and I'd like to hear about that, but I would also like to hear about, your role as a vegan mom.
Yeah. So my mom is incredible. She's so kind and compassionate, and, you hear people say that we're all vegan at heart and that we're all born vegan. My mom's like a great example of that, because she has always had it in her heart. And it was just really a lack of information. And she is vegan now, and she has been almost as long as Evan and I have, because once she was in New York at the time when we found out, but once she came down and we explained everything to her, that was it. She was done too. So yeah, it's like I think many parents teach their children to be kind and compassionate to certain species of animals. I think it was rare that my mom was so across the board, like as far as ticks. I remember, I'm from upstate New York, and she would pull ticks out of me. Fall, winter time is the time of year when we're raking leaves and jumping in them, and going in the woods, when I would sometimes get a lot in one season. And she would feel so sad. And as she would pull these ticks out and put them in alcohol, killing them, she would say how bad she felt and how sad it was. They couldn't help, they were born a tick. And we just wished that that tick hadn't come across me, and like had just, lived their life in the woods and never came across me or any other human. I mean, deer and other animals, they just live with ticks, and not all of them have diseases. Many do, unfortunately, but like not everybody has the ability to take tweezers and like pull them out. But yeah, it was interesting that my mom was so kind. Even mosquitoes too. She would always talk about how sad, but like obviously we do have to protect ourselves. Mosquitoes kill like close to 1 million humans a year, and they definitely are not our friends. But yeah, so I think when Evan was born, I wasn't eating animals for quite some time at that point. And I tried to instill the same kindness and compassion into him. And I had made weird decisions at the time. I wasn't vegan, so like had I been vegan then, I definitely would have felt compelled to raise him vegan. But because I was vegetarian, and I did a lot of bizarre things as a vegetarian. I mean, I bought a vehicle that had leather interior. I wouldn't buy a leather jacket, but if my grandma had given me one, I thought I was cool wearing it when I was younger, even though I was vegetarian. I remember I cooked a poor dead turkey one year because all the people that I lived with were not vegetarian like I was, and they had already bought the turkey, and I just knew I could cook better than them. I look back on these things and I'm like, I thought that I really had it all figured out back then. It's interesting. But yeah, so when Evan was young, I probably was a little bit confusing, but I made a decision not to raise him vegetarian. His dad wasn't vegetarian. Their family was not. I decided that I was going to like not feed him animals myself, but that I wouldn't stop him. Now I feel really weird about this, and even talking about it feels strange, but it's just the truth. So he really didn't eat many animals when he was younger. I guess sometimes when he visited the family on the other side, they would maybe feel like I was depriving him, so they would try to make him eat more dead animals. But when he was with me, he almost always opted, except for one time that I can remember, for the at least land animal free option. I really didn't give fish much merit back then. I believed a lot of the lies that were all taught. That was another bizarre thing. I did do like 2 or 3 times that I can remember when I called myself vegetarian. I attempted fishing. I don't even like calling it that. I attempted fish murdering, fish terrorizing. I just thought they were, 10-second memories, don't feel pain. I don't know that I necessarily thought they were stupid, but I definitely didn't think they felt pain, or that like, it was going to affect them that much. One of the times I remember I wanted to just hang out with these boys that I thought were cute when me and my best friend were visiting Florida with my family. We went to visit a pier near my uncle's house, and like, that's not a good reason to like do something like that. But one interesting thing happened. All the little poor baby shrimp that had been frozen, they actually were not dead. A lot of them, as they started to thaw out, they started moving. And that like really freaked me out. And it's a memorable thing. So I guess even these bizarre things I did and that weren't consistent with my morals and values had an impact on me. But yeah, anyway, so Evan, yeah, I feel like everything, the compassion is innately there with kids in general. And so I think, like you said, we are born with it, but instilling that empathy definitely makes a huge difference. And making the connections from a young age are things that have stuck with me. And I'm sure that it is a big part of the reason why Evan so easily got things when the time came. He understood things better than I did. In fact, when it came to, I celebrated when he stopped eating land animals. And I celebrated by getting a Groupon for a dead sea life restaurant and ordered, if I remember correctly, a fillet of dead salmon and a fillet of dead mahi. And they both came with sides, which happened to be, vegetarian options. So we celebrated by me eating all the sides and Evan eating the two different chunks of dead fishes. So that was like really bizarre. And it was shortly after that that Evan must have just been thinking and thinking about it. And he asked me to please do research with him. So we sat down on my laptop in his room, and I remember sitting on the floor together and we started looking up information. He was asking me questions and I would type them in. And we found out that fish and other aquatic animals, they have friends and families too. They feel pain. They remember unpleasant experiences and try to avoid them in the future. And Evan looks at me and he says, well, Mommy, they're just like all the other animals that I decided not to eat, so I'm not going to eat them either. And then it was like the next time my mom comes down, at the time they were snowbirds, and he's like, Grandma Lynn, why are you saving bees and spiders and ants? We have all these bug emergencies. We make a big deal. We have to get a cup and a paper and save them, or sometimes they're even allowed to stay in the house. And but you're eating fish and crabs. I don't understand. And my mom didn't have an excuse, so she stopped. So like Evan has really been an inspiration for all of us. Like you said, he is part of the reason I went vegan 100,000,000%, because I mean, I wouldn't have even gotten the fish without him, even though I didn't eat them. That was more because I didn't like to eat fish at the time when I decided to stop eating animals. And I think I tried like maybe shrimp when I was really, really little, and wasn't something that I enjoyed. I liked more the garlicky and the butter, and not the dead fish or sea life. So I even remember when Evan was really young, I worked at a restaurant on Clearwater Beach, and I remember carrying plates of dead grouper that were breaded. And I'm sure it was more like the breading and everything combined. But I remember smelling and thinking, my tastes have changed. I probably would like this now. But then I also was like, no, I don't want to be able to ruin my record of saying how long it's been since I've eaten an animal. And like, even though they're not the same as what I thought at the time, so glad I know better now. Thank you to so much to people like Mary Finelli from fishfield.org and Jonathan Balcom, the author of What a Fish Knows. There's so many amazing people that are working to spread awareness, because land animals are bad enough in the billions, but sea life in the trillions each year. It's just the numbers aren't even fathomable. But yeah, so Evan, when we found out, when I told you the story earlier about what the person from work had said to me about being a hypocrite and what I was supporting, I looked it up, was really disturbed to find out she was right. At the time, Cowspiracy was like a documentary that pre-vegans were like talking about. I wasn't vegan yet either. So people who weren't even vegetarian were talking about this documentary, saying how awesome it was. And so went home, watched that, and that confirmed things that I already knew from my vegetarian research about animal agriculture. Plus, I learned a lot more about impacts of the dairy industry. And I was just like, okay, this is something that I need to try to do. And I had been thinking about, like, there has to be something to this vegan thing for a little bit before that. And I kept doing this cycle where I was going to make, one last thing of some kind of crunch wrap that was sealed together with disgusting cow's breast milk cheese. I can veganize this whole thing, by the way. But at the time, I was just going to make that once more. And then I'd run out of one ingredient and I'd be like, oh, I don't want to waste all the rest of the ingredients. Let me do that again. But I didn't have the information about the dairy industry to really like make me stop. So it was just this cycle of like, yeah, these vegans, maybe there is something to it. But I just thought they were a bit much, like not having anything from an animal because you're just like better than everybody else, when I'm thinking eggs and dairy don't hurt them. They just make those things. Like, these vegans are silly. So I watch Cowspiracy. I find out the dairy industry is rape and kidnapping and torture and murder. And I find out like 90% of the so-called ground beef in this country comes from dairy cows that the industry is done with. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is all like the same thing. So I'm freaked out. I tell Evan in the morning, mommy's going to try going vegan. And he's like, well, I'm doing it too. And I really tried to talk him out of it. I was probably worried about so many things at the time. But the immediate things that I said to him that I thought were going to help me convince him to just let me try it first and he could try later if it went well. I tried really hard by telling him he wasn't going to be able to have pizza on pizza day at school, that he was going to have to watch everybody eat cupcakes in front of him. This is a kid that just turned 5, by the way. Like, he wasn't, this is something kids that age really typically care about. So I'm thinking, he's not going to want to ditch these things. And he just looked at me in the rearview mirror and said, I don't care, mommy, if animals are getting hurt and I don't need it, I don't want it. And I really didn't think it was going to stick. I said, okay, well, mommy won't be mad at you when you change your mind. And he obviously did not change his mind. How could we? We learned more and more information. And that's why we are trying so hard to wake everybody up.
I want to bring up something about Evan, because all this happened when Evan was 5 years old. You tried to talk him out of it. He decided he wanted to go vegan. He had a huge impact on you and your mom. And, sometimes I see really nasty comments on some of Evan's stuff and some of your stuff that involves Evan that says, you're forcing him to do this activism. We've talked about it before, and, there are times when parents force their kids to do things in life. I mean, that, maybe they shouldn't, and that's true. But Evan is the real deal. Nobody's forcing him to do this stuff. I've done activism with Evan, and I know that he's the real deal. And I know that when he wants to take a break and just be a kid, he does that. But I want to hear your perspective from that, because we've talked about it, and you've brought up ageism, because somebody can be really powerful and want to do these things when they're a kid.
Yeah, definitely. We've heard it all. Kids are so compassionate. Kids are so kind. Kids love animals. They want to help animals. I mean, it's not fair to have this situation where we're just born into this world of normalized violence and then not be able to do anything about it. I mean, that would be unfair. So Evan, this is somebody who you say, hey, what's up? I'm vegan. How are you today? I'm vegan. Every he loves being vegan so much. Now he's 13, and like, I never worried that he was going to be embarrassed, or we get a lot of parents who need advice and help because their kids are going through being made fun of and struggles at school. And, Evan has dealt with, he was homeschooled for a while. Then he went to a plant-based school for a couple years, which he really enjoyed. But even at one time there, when a student had brought stuff from home, he was getting body parts of his pig friends waved in his face. And the school dealt with it and had Evan's back and the animals' back because they do care. But Evan is not, he's sad for the piggy, of course, but he knows that being vegan is cool. He knows it's the right thing. He chose to do it. I couldn't talk him out of it. No one could. When he was 6, I messed with him really badly around, we were getting ready to get hit by a hurricane, possibly. Luckily, it missed us at the last second, but we were last minute decision heading over to my parents' house, and we had packed everything basically in laundry baskets. And at the time, he was really, really a bit much about, is it vegan? Is it vegan? Are you sure it's vegan? Is it definitely vegan? I mean, he reads the labels like it's nobody's business. He would even come into the restaurant that I worked at the time, and he would ask for me to come and take the order, and then it would get brought out. He would not touch it until I came by and verified that everything was right and that they hadn't accidentally put something. And it's so cute. Like, he cares so much. So I messed with him, and he was asking me, are all of our hurricane supplies vegan? And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I'm like, no, Evan, we're getting ready for a hurricane. We're not worrying about that right now. He got so upset. So I got a video to the best of my ability, trying to make him not notice. And it was amazing how he stood up for the animals and the knowledge that he had at the time, telling me, it is nutritious. You can get everything you need without eating animals. And you can not be vegan, but I'll be vegan for the rest of my life. And that's it. And I was like, well, I buy your food and I don't know what you're going to do.
And you're just teasing him with this, right?
Yeah, I was. It was horrible. It was horrible. I encourage everybody to watch it. I was messing with him badly. He was taking Taekwondo at the time. He was getting Taekwondo out on me. I mean, he was really like, is my mom messing with me right now? She has to be, because I know my mom loves the animals and this cannot be, but is she serious? He was so frustrated, but somewhere in him, he knew I had to be messing, but it was really funny. But yeah, I mean, he knew the answers to everything way back then. He was 6 years old at the time, and everything I said to him, he had a comeback. And I'm telling him that cows and pigs, they don't matter. He's telling me they all matter, just like cats and dogs. Every one of them matters. And all kids know this until we teach them otherwise. They all know that we're all the same. They know that unless they've really never been around animals and they've really been taught that animals are bad and dirty from like birth, then that's the only way. If they are taught that, if someone is born into a family of people who exploit animals for profit, then they are going to be taught certain things, and that information is going to be passed on generation after generation, and they're going to believe certain things. But if you're not taught these things, if you're not taught that you need to do these things to animals to feed the world, or if you're not taught you have to hunt to feed your family for part of the year, or that it's fun to hunt or whatever, you're going to love animals unless you're a very, very, very small percentage of the population who is born with severe mental health issues that make you want to harm others. And that's like so incredibly rare. So when all children, I mean, when I teach at the plant-based school still, I love teaching because most of these kids, I might once in a while have one kid that considers themselves vegan in my class, but most of the kids are not vegan. So it's really an opportunity to educate them. But I tell them about situations that they can do something about, and they want to. Every kid wants to help animals. I think basically every human does, unless they're taught otherwise. I know that if we had taken 10 people randomly off the street and lined them up, and then you have someone going to hurt a dog in front of them, I bet at least 9 of them, if not all 10, are going to feel compelled to do something about it because they know that's the right thing. And the only reason they no longer know that it's the right thing to protect all the other animals is because by the time we're 4 or 5 years old, we're taught that pigs are different, cows are different, chickens are different, fishes are different. And Evan didn't get taught those things. So he's just never been lied to. And then the things that I didn't know better about, like I mentioned earlier, we learned together. And so he even knows that fishes and insects all deserve a right to their own lives.
Yeah. Well, I'm really thankful for parents like you who encourage that compassion in their kids, and parents like, your mom who did that with you. At the time of recording this right now, it's hunting season. And, as I scroll through social media, I see these videos, people that I know, people that I, went to high school with, or, whatever. And some people I don't know as well, but they're taking these photos and these videos. They're taking photos with deer that they've killed, and they're just holding them up like a trophy, their dead bodies. And there's these videos, and I usually try to scroll past these videos, but I don't know, the last few days something's compelled me to continue to watch. And it got me thinking, deer, they don't even have really probably any natural predators that come from the sky. So they're not looking up to the sky a lot, but these people are sitting in these stands, and the deer will look up at the hunter and lock eyes with them. And they're like, oh, well, this person's chill. And then they'll turn their head back down to eat, and then they get shot. And yeah, I mean, it's just unbelievable. And to bring it to my point, people are training their kids to do this. And it just blows my mind that you would get a negative reaction of your kid doing compassionate things on, under his own, volition. But nobody bats an eye at parents literally teaching their children to kill animals. I mean, maybe at one point in human history that might have been necessary, where, okay, we've got to teach our kids to survive, and this is the only way to do it. But the people that are on social media that that I know personally, a lot of them, that's not the case for them. So I want people to think long and hard about that. Because, yeah, I mean, we should applaud parents who are teaching their kids to be compassionate. And again, Evan, for example, wants to do this stuff. He asks you to do activism. He wants to do it. And it seems like overnight, Evan has turned into a young man now. But even when he was a smaller kid, he would give these speeches, and it would just bring me to tears. And I would look around, and people would be brought to tears, because he would speak and he would just put things so simply. And sometimes you can hear the same message over and over, but when you hear it from the mouth of a child, it just hits different. And Evan would do that, and he's like I said, he's a young man now. But yeah, he's always been so incredible. So I'm thankful that I'm sorry that you have to deal with the backlash of that, in addition to all the backlash for being a vegan and an activist in general that we all deal with. But yeah, I'm so thankful for him and for you and for the work that you do, and that you just continue doing it no matter what people say.
Oh, thanks. We really don't mind the backlash. I mean, if anything, I look at it like it makes me more sad that people are so angry and don't get it. I'm more like sad for them. It doesn't really, we don't take any of it to heart because we just know they don't know. They're just like so far brainwashed or desensitized, whichever end of the spectrum or combination of the two it might be. But yeah, Evan, he says things like I could sit for 2 weeks and I can't come up with something as good as he just said
Off the top of his head.
Yeah, it's unreal. He really like he never stops amazing me. But what you were saying earlier about, the scrolling through social media, I go on barely these days, like scrolling, and Facebook's messing with me. They have it. It's probably because I keep commenting on this stuff, but they have it so every like 3 to 4 things on my feed, it's at first it was dead fish and people killing fish with like spears. Now lately, for the last like 2 weeks or so, it's been mostly deer, elk, giant, like the biggest antlers I've ever seen, and these people just smiling, but most recently children. And it is so depressing.
It's awful.
I feel so sad. It's been little girls over and over again. I've heard the kids, talk about what it's like to go through FFA and 4-H if the animal husbandry part of. I was in 4-H, so that's why I always clarify. Like 4-H has some really great stuff about it. But we didn't do animal husbandry. I didn't, at least. So I know when kids go through that, there's the cry corner, and like they literally have to be desensitized. And that is such a horrible, horrible thing to do to a child. I have so many friends who tell me that they were made to kill an animal as a child, and that it was such a horrific experience that had such a traumatizing impact on them. Like, I just don't understand why we're doing this when we don't have to. I think it's like super weird because the supermarkets are like really horrible. You walk in and there's just packages of bloody decomposing body parts and gallons of someone's breast milk and cartons of someone's ovulations. Like, it's the most insane thing. And then you have these hunters who, like, the regenerative farmers and the hunters, it's like they're both trying to do something in a better way, but not realizing that it's totally unnecessary in the first place. And like, you don't have to find a less awful way to do something. But like the hunters are just, they're so confused. They have it all just completely backwards. Like, they think it's a sport. Sports are supposed to be fair. Everybody's supposed to know they're playing. They say that it helps them get through like seasons and stuff, but these people have like fancy, expensive hunting equipment. They often have, like, from my personal experiences, when I'm talking to them, they have like big fancy pickup trucks and stuff. Like, they are going out to eat regularly and shopping at supermarkets all the time. And what they're doing is they're messing up natural selection completely. And they claim to care about conservation, but they're like trying to kill the biggest, oldest, strongest males with the best like prize rack to hang their poor murder victims' head on their wall. It's so weird. And like, we just got to visit Yellowstone and we saw like a pretty big herd of elk, but there were like no males. There was one young one and that was it. And then on the way during our travels to do activism, in Portland, we had stopped at a preserve, and there were 3 giant male elk that were in a protected area, and they were together. And I went in and I was asking questions to make sure like they were not going to be killed or something weird or what was going on with them. We needed to know. So we found out the woman that worked there said there couldn't be any females in there with them because they would kill each other, most likely, because if there were 3 big males like that. And because I was like, why are they all male? I just had all these questions, of course. And then she said that you never see them with a rack this big, because we were like, so like, holy moly, these guys, we had to look through this like lens thing that they had set up, this like telescope thing. And their antlers were just so magnificent. And I had never seen anybody like that. I'm not really even in photos. And she said, you never see them because the hunters kill them before they ever get this big in the wild.
Oh.
Yeah. And then like also, I just don't understand. I just don't understand. And then you have all these people at Yellowstone just like so excited to see all these bison. And then they're selling bison brats at one of the places on the property. And the bison that are there at Yellowstone are protected. But like, I think they're constantly bringing them other places and things. I don't know. It's just all so bizarre. And none of it makes any sense.
Yeah. Y'all can't see Shannon right now, but she's wearing a camo hat that says hunting is murder on it. But, yeah, I mean, what you said about what that person said about the elk, you never see the males like that. It reminds me of being at a sanctuary, and sometimes I give tours at Changing Hearts Farm Sanctuary in North Carolina, and, people are like, how are these cows this big? I'm like, these cows are actually pretty young. It's just you never see cows grow to what they're supposed to grow to, because they're always killed before that. It's very sad. People don't realize the cows live, for decades.
You're right. It's just unbelievable. I encourage everyone to go visit a sanctuary and see how big cows can get.
You recently had a huge victory. You and your family and some activists there in Florida prevented a slaughterhouse from being built. I wonder if you could just tell us about that. How'd you find out about it? Did you feel like you had a pretty good shot of winning from the beginning? How long did that process take? And yeah, what do you think ultimately led all of you to victory for the animals?
This slaughterhouse thing was like a roller coaster of emotions, and we really had to go through a lot of like emotional stress and trauma, to be honest. I mean, Milena and I would sometimes have to just call each other and be like, we just couldn't stop feeling sad. And like, because we would sit through 5 hours of feeling like we're in the twilight zone at these meetings. So basically, this is how it started. One of my good friends who has a sanctuary in the county where they were planning to put this slaughterhouse contacted me and said, Shannon, I just found out about this. It seems like they've been working on it for a long time, but behind closed doors. And I don't have the capacity right now to organize anything. Plus, I've been out of the activism scene for a couple years, just focusing on the sanctuary. So even if I make a page, I don't think it'll get any traction. Do you think you can try to help? So without really knowing much about the situation at the time, I quickly made a page for the upcoming meeting and started inviting people who I knew were in the area and asking. And the woman who asked me to do that, she then invited tons of people, and she doesn't give herself enough credit. She's like a superhero in all aspects. Like I call her when I don't know what to do about an animal that needs to be rescued and I'm so desperate, and she doesn't sleep until she figures it out, which is why I always feel horrible and try not to call her about it. But try every other option first. But she's so amazing, and she did get a ton of people to all of these meetings, and she's the one that really she signed up for their emails. She actually sees emails, unlike some people named Shannon. And so she was really on top of telling us when these wonderful people in the county of Alachua and the city of Newberry would sneak a meeting on it. It was one time a meeting got snuck on the agenda. The schedule got put out Thursday, and they literally sent out a schedule, then sent a second email later that day saying they were revising the schedule. And you had to click and then click a button to re-download to be able to see that they had snuck it on the agenda. And this was for a meeting that was happening on Monday.
That's so ridiculous. And politicians do things like this all the time. That's what gets me really discouraged. Part of what gets me really discouraged about political activism. We're seeing this on a major scale right now with all the Stop Cop City, Defend the Atlanta Forest stuff. And we see it all the time. Did any of y'all have any experience like with doing this political activism? Did you know that this would be what you're up against, or were you just kind of figuring it out along the way? Because forgive me if I'm wrong, but I've never known you to be like a political expert or anything, but you were doing great work and got this done.
We had no idea what the heck we were doing. We've spoken at a meeting here and there, but no, we really were learning as we were going, and we learned a lot.
It's impressive that you even decided to take this on with so little experience.
So I've been like grasping at straws since I went vegan, trying to figure out what is going to be effective, what's going to help. And of course, there's a never-ending plethora of tasks that need to be done, and ideas are always coming, but like it's just it never ends. So because this came into my lap, just like when an animal comes into my lap, if we come across an animal on the road, or if someone tells me about the animal, then I feel like now it's my problem. So this was another one of those things where like I really did not have the time, but I'm so glad that we made it somehow. We made the time, and how could I say no to my superhero friend who never, ever, ever, ever stops, who literally puts like everyone in front of her. She's such a great person, and this was right in her backyard, right down the road from where they have rescued animals. They want to kill animals and have that smell blowing to their home, to their sanctuary. So and we have other friends who also have sanctuaries in that county. So when she said, can you help? I was like, okay. So at that point, I only knew about one meeting. I didn't know how many we were going to end up going to. I didn't know how much we would grow to learn about these different commissioners and the corruption involved. Like one of the biggest things that really infuriated me about the whole thing is that the chair, Madam Chair, Anna Pritzia, she should really have to register as a lobbyist, because she works for the University of Florida for their IFAS extension, and that was a huge partnership. All of this was discussed. We're quite sure that sunshine laws were broken. We know for a fact that that sneaking of that meeting onto that Newberry agenda was definitely something that needed at least a 7-day heads up, and we verified that. They tried to say, oh no, that was determined to be, there's no determined length of time. And there absolutely is. It's 7 days, and even 7 days is really like, short notice.
You're telling me lawmakers don't know the law?
That's funny, right?
Wow, I can't believe it.
Yeah, nobody seems to nobody seems to know laws. Nobody seems to be able to explain laws. Like, I've tried to ask police officers many times to just explain something to me, and they can't.
They can't.
These are trained people. Like, how are they enforcing laws that they don't understand? And why can't they just clearly explain something to us so we can make a decision?
Because they don't know themselves, that's why. Or if they do know, they want to manipulate you into whatever they want to manipulate you into. But that's a whole other discussion.
These systems are all built on so much corruption. You look at anything, any organization, the Bureau of Land Management, the FWC, and all the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. I mean, everything they claim to care about is complete BS. They are literally made up of the people that just want to kill animals in the bodies of water and on the land. And they're the ones that are making all the rules.
If you had not disrupted that whole system, I really feel, and when I say you, I mean the general you, like you and everybody that was a part of that campaign, I really feel like it just would have went on through without much.
I'm quite sure that there were a few local people who would have tried to speak up, but I don't think it would have done much good. They really, they were feeling like, I mean, the commissioners so there's two sets of commissioners we're dealing with. We had to go to county meetings and city meetings. And like the city commissioners, all they really cared about was getting this road done. Now, the mayor, we found out his family actually used to own this 96-acre property that was all being talked about. The 15 acres that they wanted to put the slaughterhouse on. I mean, this is like right near an elementary school and a middle school. It like borders on two different sides. But on all the other sides, it's his family's property. The mayor, the cattle ranching fourth generation cattle rancher mayor, and his father is at all the meetings talking as well, and like it's just so corrupt. And
I can feel everyone listening's blood starting to boil a little bit. We're all of our collective blood is boiling.
But yeah, these city commissioners, they actually, even one of them was a cattle rancher, and they were over it. They were like, all we really cared about was getting our county road fixed, and we don't really want this slaughterhouse. Like, it's not that big of a deal to us. We are not going to keep sitting through these 5 and 7 and 9 and 12-hour meetings anymore. And the one that said he is a cattle rancher himself, he said, this thing can't make any money anyway. And that's what I thought. I did the numbers, and I totally put the animals being sentient and my love for them and everything else to the side while I was doing so much research on this. I was finding out the amounts of how many pounds cows typically weigh when they get sent to the slaughterhouse. How much is there? I mean, it was horrible. There's live weight, there's hanging weight, there's all these different terms that they use. And like, it turns out a 1,200-pound cow, they only get about like 450 pounds of what they call edible at the end. And like, this is disease promoting violence. Like, I just don't understand how any of this seemed like a good idea to use $2.5 million of ARPA funds that were given because of the pandemic. This was part of the American Rescue Plan Act that they designate that money to go towards building a slaughterhouse, which is a breeding ground for zoonotic diseases. Like, that's insane.
So you're doing all this intense research, you're gathering people together, you're doing a lot of travel to get to, like you said, both meetings. There's two sets of meetings that are happening, and you're doing your usual activism, traveling across the country, coming back and getting back in time for these meetings, like really staying dedicated to this. And what kind of tools are you pulling out of the tool belt here? You're kind of I think you formed some relations like with the people, like with some of the people who you thought might be sympathetic, some of the politicians who you thought might be sympathetic, and then you were putting pressure on the ones who were not sympathetic. There was a big turnout at every meeting. Like what all was going on with that?
Yeah, we learned their different personalities. We tried to learn the things that they cared about. We did become very friendly with one of the commissioners who was really helpful. He let us know, like you said, we had to get back here from one of our big trips, I think from the first Colorado trip, and we had to rush back to make it to a meeting, but he kept us up to date and would also let us know towards the end that we didn't need to come right at the beginning, so we didn't have to sit for the first 3.5 hours where that was not even on the agenda yet. So he really was amazing and helpful. Some of the commissioners really cared more about just trying to figure out what the right thing to do was. They don't see the animals the same as we do right now. They spoke about that. One of the commissioners, her father was a cattle rancher. He just passed away not that long ago. And so she said that she was always sad about animals being killed for food, and that she actually called herself vegetarian for a portion of time and still rarely eats animals. But she was very conflicted because she sees the differences between a local slaughterhouse and one that's far away. And we had to sit through the majority of these meetings is full of people who are considered experts who get like unlimited amounts of time to spew their propaganda and lies that go completely unchallenged. So we have to wait until public comment, or once in a while we were able to comment twice during a meeting, and because there would be a general section of anything and then there would be a specific after an item on the agenda was talked about portion of time. So we just it was we had to really maneuver in every which way and try to figure out in these short amount of times what would be the most effective thing to say. I mean, 3 minutes goes like that when you're trying to combat like 6 hours of misinformation that was just spewed in front of you, plus what you already planned to say before you got there.
Yeah, and I'm guessing you're trying to appeal to certain people, and then what's the strategy with those who you're not going to change their mind? Like, are you trying to annoy them and just make sure you show up at every single meeting? And how are you combating that?
That's a good question. At one point, I have another problem where I give everybody the benefit of the doubt, no matter how bad people tell me they are already. And this was the situation with Commissioner Pritzia. I wanted to believe that she was a good person who just had bad information. So we literally even showed up at a Sierra Club meeting where she was a guest speaker. At one point, we were also told we were going to get a speaking slot. And then it turns out like this whole thing was Commissioner Pritzia's idea. She was trying to gain the support of the local Sierra Club chapter. So the woman who was running the chapter was buddy with her, trying to please her because she's a commissioner. So like she didn't want to let us speak. She had this other woman that they felt more comfortable with speaking, and she was a really nice woman. She gave a great presentation, but it was about why we shouldn't eat animals. Whereas what I felt needed to be addressed was all the myths of the grazing. Like that was something that this commissioner was really championing, was the fact that I don't know what to even call it. It was just a complete fairy tale. She's being quoted in the media saying that this slaughterhouse was going to lower the carbon footprint. And so multiple times on different occasions, I tried to ask her about this. And the Sierra Club was supposed to be an opportunity to do that, where there was supposed to be where she would be available for Q&A rather than the normal at the meetings where she just says something, you have 3 minutes, she doesn't have to respond to anything you say or ask. So when we went to that meeting, I asked her to please explain how this was going to lower the carbon footprint and make a difference when transport and packaging together only came to a certain percentage. And she freaked out, yelled at me. Then she also yelled at another woman. We were the only two who got to ask anything. After she yelled at the other woman, she started yelling at me again, even though I hadn't, like, she went back to yell at me, even though I hadn't said anything again. And then she ended the entire thing and refused to take any more questions. And there were like 20 people or more that were like wanting to ask questions. So it was incredibly rude. After that happened, I got up and I went into the hallway getting literature together to give to her from the Center for Biodiversity or Biological Diversity. I have to look it up. It's I know it's a site that has great resources about grazing and overgrazing through a well-fed world. But that had amazing resources. We had printed out the facts and the myths. One of them was like a full page front and back. The other one was like 7 pages long. It had such great information. And I figured if she really cares about the things she says she cares about, then if she reads this, she will have to stop pushing this slaughterhouse because she'll understand that she had misinformation and that this is not going to help the problem that she cares about. So she actually took the information from me. And then I said to her, so if you read this and you believe it, will you stop like promoting what you're promoting? And then she spazzed out on me and left the meeting. And then from that point on, she showed no signs of any chance to get her to ever change her mind. It was very apparent that she had an agenda. She was the one that was working on this with the mayor before it was brought to any of the other commissioners. And we believe that she probably had something additional to gain, but that, of course, can't be verified. And she denies it. So, but I can't see why somebody would be so pushy about a murdering facility. Like, who wants that waste in their backyard? We surveyed people. That was another thing that we did. When you say what else came out of the tool belt, I created 4 different surveys, one for Santa Fe College, one for the students of UF, one for the citizens of Gainesville, the citizens of Newberry City, and one for the citizens of the entire county of Alachua, which Gainesville is in. And Gainesville is where the county commissioner meetings were held. So we did a lot of the surveying there as well. And we never did make it to Newberry to survey the citizens there. I wish we had, because that was like my favorite survey that I made. I had a picture of the mayor on it to see if they knew who he was, because he says that like everyone was so excited about the slaughterhouse, everyone from the baseball fields to the restaurants and every place that he frequents. He goes to like this little downtown area. He has his friends that always go to the same places all the time. And like, I know people who live in that area. They don't know who he is. They don't feel that he's approachable because they're not that little class of people that go to that specific area. So we can't say for sure the Newberry specific, but I think it would have been so interesting. We didn't expect it all to end as soon as it did, and that was really exciting. We had all of a sudden found out that, oh, this is the last meeting they're going to decide. And we really, like you said earlier, did we think we were going to, we didn't really know. I mean, we were really hopeful, but it was really hard to say because they weren't flipping like we thought they were gonna. But it was a really, really great experience. So many activists came together. We were able to get a lot of good use out of literature and signage from the plant-based treaty. That was all really relevant. Right now, the plant-based treaty is working to get different cities to agree to not ever have new slaughterhouses. So this perfectly aligned with that. And there was great information that was already available for us to hand out. And like I said, all the signs were relevant. Milena was so helpful. She's actually one of our mentors with AAM, and she's the U.S. liaison for the plant-based treaty now. And so she was so helpful in getting activists together and making it to almost all of these meetings as well. And the local people were really, it was really important that they had support because there wasn't enough of them. Their voices needed to be amplified and they needed people behind them. So when we did the surveying, we found out that most people didn't even know that this was happening. And once they had some information about how much money the commissioners had initially unanimously voted to put towards this, the average person who eats animals was very upset about that. They didn't want the money spent that way, but at the same time, they didn't really show a whole bunch of interest in taking time out of their days and nights to go to these meetings. It's really only people who have something to gain, which were all the cattle ranchers and business owners who had something to benefit from. And then the only other people showing up to the meetings were those of us who so deeply care about the animals that we were willing to take the time to sit through these. Like, I mean, if somebody had just asked me on the street, oh, do you want this much money to be spent on something? And I was like, no, not really. Why would I? Like, that doesn't seem like a good use for money. And then they were like, oh, well, will you come to this meeting? It's going to be like 6 hours. And then the next one's going to be like 12. And the next one's going to be 7 hours. And you don't really care that much about any of this, but will you come to all these? Like, of course not. So that's why there's just not enough local support. And it was so important that we were there also because the locals, they really needed us too. And I think it was intimidating. Like when the commissioners, when some of them saw our faces at the meetings, it was really funny, especially towards the last couple meetings. They're like, oh, no.
I'm sure they got to know you really well.
They did. And we did fun talking outside.
So it sounds like, to kind of recap this, you used a multitude of tactics. I think number one was just being super dedicated to the process, regardless of how inconvenient it was. The second part was, teaming up with others. So that would be locals. That would be other organizations like the Plant-Based Treaty. That would be even non-vegans in the area who were against the slaughterhouse for, whatever reason it might be, to all come together to try to prevent this from being built. Another part is, talking to the politicians one-on-one to either try to get them to flip or to form relationships with them so that they can help here are some good steps to take and things like that. Or is there anything I'm missing out of that?
Milena and I actually went and took courses, and I think Plant-Based Treaty paid for us to do that with the Farm Transition Academy, I think it was called. Gosh, I should double check. But that we went to several weeks of a course, and that was to try to learn about options that farmers had, because we were talking to all these farmers at some of the meetings too. So there was that. And gosh, we had so many, there were so many new activists involved too, that some other mentors and mentees got involved, and yeah, there was a lot involved. But yes, that was one thing I forgot, was that academy that we went to, and that was really helpful. It helped. I think I'm pretty empathetic towards people who harm and kill animals. I think I'm pretty darn nice. Like, we've gone to Utah, and Rick Pittman brought us with the XE stuff to his properties, and Evan and I hugged him and had nice words with him, and I've made friends with a slaughterhouse owner in California who, I don't say anything mean to. I have made pretty good friends with someone who used to haul animals. He stopped recently. The last time I talked to him, just confirmed that he's now able to make his money trucking non-living things instead of living beings. So he's much happier. But I think I have a lot of empathy for people, and I'm able to have conversations with them. I think that most vegans, I think we do a pretty good job of that, because if like the average person, I don't think that they could just like interact with people who like beat the crap out of and murder dogs on a daily basis, or like, so I think we do a pretty good job of that in general. But where was I going with that? Who knows?
Well, I think it's amazing what you all were able to accomplish and how dedicated you were, even to the point of taking courses to find out more about this. You went into this with little to no political experience, and I feel like you came out the other side, not only victorious for the animals, not only, bringing other people up with you to be knowledgeable about all these things, not only encouraging each other throughout this whole process, but, also preparing yourself for situations like this that might arise in the future. So, I think it's really incredible what y'all were able to accomplish there. So I think most activists know you for like your strongly opinionated posts, your passionate speeches, your disruptive activism, but there's really so much more that only a handful of people see. I see it sometimes when, I'm with you. But every time I've been with you in a vehicle or something, if you see an injured animal on the side of the road, or a slaughter truck at a gas station or something, you jump out. You always just seem ready to go. People who come to AAM convergences know this, others may not. You cook for everyone at least twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day during a convergence. Sometimes those convergences are 9 days long. Some of these events, you're cooking for dozens of people, not only cooking, but you're often the one shopping, getting good deals on the food and on the vans, and then you're leading chants at the protest later that day. You just do it all. You do the activism that's very visible, but you're also doing all these things that are behind the scenes, or just things that need to get done because somebody has to do them. And the cooking's so important, not only because, if a bunch of activists are at an event trying to work hard for the animals, they have to eat, but because, we can get more activists there because you cook at these things, and, people don't have to worry as much about the food. They don't have to worry about, having a huge expense of eating out. So you're really helping to break down a financial barrier there for people as well. And not only that, but the food's just amazing. Like I think about it when I'm not at the convergences. So it's really good stuff. But there are just a million other things that you do that may not get the attention that it deserves. And I just wanted to talk to you about that, like how activism takes many different forms, and we should all be open to all of it and appreciate the people that do it. So, with this slaughterhouse thing that we just talked about, I mean, you're developing new skills. You're not only putting the skills that you've known for years to use, like, public speaking and, things like that, but, all this other stuff. And then at the convergences, I mean, it's just everything. It's the food, it's the shopping, it's all this stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think it goes to show that, like, there's so many aspects of activism that people don't think about. When people get involved in activism, they think, say they're an introvert. Oh, I can't do public speaking. Oh, I can't have, conversations with people. Oh, I really just couldn't go into a store and, start yelling on a megaphone. Like, that's okay. There's a million other things you can do. And I wanted to talk to you about that because you're doing everything on the spectrum, but not everybody has to do everything. Some people can, find these unique ways to be helpful. And I know, like, every time we have a convergence, the rock stars to me are the people that are, like, randomly bringing over cupcakes because they're thinking about us, or the people that, fix some late night snacks because everybody's hungry or something. I just want to talk to you about that aspect of activism and, your thoughts on it.
I appreciate all those nice things you said. Well, yeah, there's like so much that can be done. And well, just an example, I'm like so tired right now. My brain is tired right now because we've just been nonstop for so many days. And this past weekend, we were helping with Central Florida Veg Fest, which prior to the pandemic is one of the country's largest vegan events every year. And we need help. Like, we were there the entire day before for about 9 hours. And in past years, there used to be a lot of volunteers. I remember this year it was just like I had to have Evan watch his sister because Wes and I had to be all hands on deck because it was just like us, the main organizer, and one person showed up for a bit. Then when she left, luckily another friend showed up for a bit, and she helped until it got dark. And then the next so I after we got everything set up, I was running the speaker and food demo tent the next day, and I had gotten everything hooked up the night before because some people like you might know that I'm really last minute and behind on things, and this was just such an important thing. There's no way I could mess it up. So last year, and also for Earth Day, we're at a different park, but same equipment. That's what I do. I get it ready the night before so that nothing will go wrong. And this year, that didn't matter. The next day, others were hooked into the electrical box that I was, and I think we just had one extra that's not normally there. And all day, I had issues with my microphones and projectors, and it would have been so amazing if there was just, like, a technical person who knows how to do these things, who could have been setting up and running this for the day, and then I could have been helping with a problem because it was so difficult for me. I have a baby who barely 17 months old, and then Evan is trying to have fun and, but I don't want him completely out of sight, and it's just a lot. So
How can we break down these barriers? How can we break down the idea of what activism is? Because I think when you say animal rights activism, people think about a very specific thing. I remember one instance in particular, and I think I may have mentioned it on the podcast before, but I had made a post about activism and somebody had commented, well, I just don't have time for activism because I'm always at the sanctuary working with the animals there. I'm like, that's activism. Like, that is one of the most important forms of activism. Like, that's how
gosh.
I
If
know.
somebody is doing that, they feel like they're not doing activism. That's so sad. Oh my
Exactly.
goodness.
Exactly. But it is a real problem, I believe, in our movement, that people only consider certain things to be activism. People only consider certain things to be important. And I think part of that is just our fault that people are not getting involved in this way, because we're not
You're right.
celebrating
The
those
best job.
people enough and giving them attention and realizing, what's needed. So how can we break these barriers down to where we can say, like, hey, you can cook, you can clean, you can be a technical person, like you can do these things. Like if you're taking out the trash at the activist house at an event, if you're if you're a plumber, like you could go to a sanctuary and help them if they have a plumbing problem. Or if you're an electrician, if you're a mechanic, like there are ways to help animals and help the movement, like regardless of what your special skills are. Like how do we break down these barriers and allow people to get involved that maybe wouldn't otherwise get involved?
I guess like maybe this is just something I'm thinking right now because you asked me right now. You're absolutely right. Like when Evan and I, when we do our presentation at a lot of the Veg Fest, that's one of the main things we talk about. It's like what you just said. If you're an electrician or a plumber or you have some special skill and you can use that in a way that you might not initially think about, you can let the local animal sanctuaries know about your skills and let them know that if they're ever in a bind, to let you know, you can hook them up. Or you can do something like 5 or 10%. If you own your own business, you could do something like 5 or 10% goes to blah, blah, blah. And maybe that will, in addition to giving a little bit of funds to the sanctuary, maybe that'll provoke someone of your customers to say, oh, what's that sanctuary about? And start a nice conversation. There's all different things that people can do. If someone is a video editor, or if someone likes to do a certain type of social media, they could let me know and they can help me and feed Evan out because I am terrible at it. I mean, I am horrible at it. Sometimes I look at Instagram. Sometimes I don't go on Instagram for weeks at a time by accident. Like time just flies for me. I hope if anyone's listening to this and I've ever ignored you or something, I'm not being mean. It's an accident. Time just like flies for me. There's these big giant. All right. So sometimes I'll log on and then I'll look and I'll see like important things. And then I'll look over at like on Evan's page, like, when did we post last? And it'll be like 3 or 6 months. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so bad because we've been doing stuff this entire time. I just don't have the capacity and like technology. Some things I'm like really, really good at. And I've always been kind of tech savvy since I was a kid. But then it just messes with me. Videos will load like 98, 99% and then just not finish. This has happened to me like consistently over and over again, so many times I can't even tell you. So like sanctuaries would probably love help with social media. They are so busy with the animals. They don't even have enough funds most of the time to take care of the animals the way that they would love to. They are fundraising for emergencies all the time for new animals coming in. They would love to just have money to be able to build everything perfectly, have everything amazing, take amazing care of the animals that are not even theirs. Like they would love to be able to say, oh, I can foster that animal and get them vet care in the meantime and get them ready to go to their forever home. But they don't have enough funds to be able to say that they're going to be able to take care of their animals 5 years from now. And so how can they foster animals that are not going to be in their care forever and provide vet care for them? Like these are things like, so when they're so busy and they're trying to raise funds, somebody helping with their social media and helping them with fundraising could be a huge thing that you don't even have to leave your house to do. I can't think of a skill or a special talent that couldn't be used in some way to help the animals.
There's so many opportunities. I mean, if you are just an organized person and you would want to fill out some spreadsheets or something like that. Like, there is stuff to do. There's stuff to do. If you have a love of books, I mean, that you could find a way to, use that. If you have, the list just goes on and on. So, yes, thank you, Shannon, for not only doing the forms of activism that are like seen, but the ones that are, maybe people don't even realize that these kinds of forms of activism are out there.
Thank you. That's really nice. I appreciate it. But you asked me, what can we do to tell people and to break these barriers down? I don't know. I'm thinking if we just like make videos ourselves, because I said earlier, I don't scroll through social media much, but sometimes I do for a second and I see these weird videos. One of the ones I saw a couple weeks ago was somebody that probably had a good intention, but they were literally discouraging people from doing activism. And I was so upset because they have a huge following and they were like, basically like, oh, I tried to do cubes and I tried to do this and but I was angry and it wasn't for me and I didn't have any good conversations. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, please, please don't deter people from doing activism. Like, maybe there need to be more videos of people just saying how they were scared to do activism at first or whatever barriers that they felt and came across, and that there are so many ways to do activism. If you love to cook, you can give classes, you can take videos. You don't even have to show yourself if you're nervous. You can just focus on the ingredients and the food and share that. But yeah, maybe us all making videos and then just like sharing the videos. You know how like we had a long time ago, the Animals Need You video? If we made, and it, instead of taking a bunch of time and making somebody edit it together, if everybody just had a basic like outline and it was like, what were some barriers that you felt getting started? Did it take you a long time? What did you learn? And what, I don't know, something like that. I think it could work. I think you're onto something here. Everybody's affected by different things. So if people see different people talking about how they could get involved, like, whose videos keep coming across my feed anytime I log on to Instagram is Empty the Cages. I don't know if he's going by Hunter now or what he's going by, but that is like such a great example of, this is somebody who just takes everything about their day. This is what I eat. This is what I'm going to, and just like, I don't know. There's so many things that can be done.
Yeah, I think he's going to give a workshop through AAM about TikTok pretty soon. So be on the lookout for that. So speaking of all that, what are your favorite forms of activism?
Oh my gosh. That's like the hardest question in the world. If you ask Vegan Evan, he'll answer in 2 seconds and say disruptions. And disruptions are one of my absolute favorites. But, geez, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like it's not just about the activism. It's about the activists too. So like, even sometimes when I'm doing a form of activism that's not exactly my favorite, or it's not my very most favorite topic to do activism on, it's very impactful for both like the cause and also on me because of the just everybody together and the feel of it. It gives me more hope. And so, I don't know, I guess what I'm trying to say, for example, is like, well, I love to do activism to educate people about the dairy industry more than anything else. But even though doing a fur protest might not be my favorite as much as it is doing a dairy demo, sometimes the way the activists are together and the excitement and the confidence and knowing that we have had so many victories together, there's something about that that is just so important. So I don't know. I love disruptions. I love doing food giveaways. Like, I love having conversations and doing unbranded TV demos the most, where like can just walk around because I have a problem standing still. I like to do demos that have like different things combined. I think that's actually my favorite. I'm going to go with that as my answer. I like to do a demo where there's chalking, where there's megaphones, where there's literature being handed out. If there's some type of samples in addition to that, even better. Because like I said, everybody's reached in different ways and by different people. And also, sometimes when people walk by us, they can't relate to the one thing that we're doing. But if we're doing 5 things, that just increases the chances like 5 times that they're going to relate to something or be hit by something.
And that circles back to what we were just talking about as well, which is there's so many different ways to get involved. I mean, if you want to show up to a protest, you don't have to yell, you don't have to scream. You can chalk, you can hand out literature, you can have conversations on the side with people and do some outreach. And that's a way, I mean, to achieve, that feeling that you're talking about of everybody being connected and, we're all, working together toward this one thing. You don't necessarily have to use the tactics that everybody else happens to be using. You can, do your own thing too, as long as it's within the confines of that protest and, I guess the organizer's vision and all that kind of thing. But yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense as far as, doing something that has a lot of different activism elements to it.
Yep. I love visiting sanctuaries. Even if I'm not like volunteering the day of, I still count that as activism because I am going to share stories no matter what. Even if I forget to take photos and videos, which happens, I'm still going to be impacted by the animals there and I'm going to share their stories. So, and it's self-care for me. And sometimes some of the activism that I do is like, I don't know if selfish is exactly the right word, but like, I love yelling into a megaphone. So that is an outlet for me too. I am really mad about the things that are happening to animals and I'm really, really sad. And if I sit and just think about how sad it is, it's like really depressing, but yelling into a megaphone really helps. And so, maybe that's another reason I really enjoy those fur protests.
Activism, I mean, it's not about us, it's about the animals, but at the same time, like if you can find ways that make activism more sustainable, like if yelling into a megaphone, you get a little bit of that release, but it's also being put to good use. I mean, we should do that. I mean, activism is work, but why do the things that burn us out the most? Why not try to find, something that, feels a little bit good. I mean, just like you were talking about that person earlier that made that post that was discouraging people from doing activism. I mean, I relate to that person because I got super burned out with doing outreach. I mean, it just felt like it felt frustrating to me just trying to convince one person at a time, and like these people, they just don't get it. And and some people like you, for example, just probably have a lot more patience than I do with these people, and enjoy the conversation, and I probably have a lot more optimism than I do when talking to people, and that I just don't have, and that's okay. I mean, I've found other things that make activism a little more sustainable for me, and we should all do that. It's not to say we shouldn't ever step outside our comfort zones. I mean, I think that's where some of the really good stuff is, when we step outside of our comfort zones. But do things that you can feel good about, and things that'll help sustain you and not burn you out as you're doing your activism. There's nothing wrong with that at all. So what industries do you think the animal rights movement should be focusing on right now? This is a hot topic of debate, and Shannon and I talk about this stuff all the time, and a lot of times we disagree, but we still support each other's activism and do work together. But I'm interested to know like what you think people should be focusing on the most.
Okay, so I think that there should be two major focuses. One in the so-called food sector and one in the other category. There's different, I don't know. I think the dairy should be the main focus in the food sector because it has the most shock value, and also it is addictive. It's the thing that most people have the hardest time with. And it's also something that is becoming kind of cool and popular depending on where you're at. It's interesting. I pay a lot of attention when I'm in the supermarkets, and it does vary by area and even by supermarket, what people are putting into their carts most often when it comes to the milk. But I do often see that in some supermarkets, it's mostly plant-based milk being put into shopping carts, but it's not consistent. Like if you pay too much attention, you'll see yogurt, butter, cheese, ice cream, and other things that are not plant-based and are made with the breast milk of usually cows and sometimes goats. So it's interesting. There are trends happening right now, and I think that we have some big advantages with that. I just saw, like, in the last day or two, Delta Airlines announced they're the first ones that are going to be offering plant-based creamer. So that's like a big win. I think that this is my thoughts on dairy. So basically, like, people have no idea what's going on in the dairy industry. For the most part, it's widespread ignorance. There's a bit more knowledge than there used to be because of social media, but I think even the people that kind of get it don't fully get it. And I believe strongly that most people that call themselves vegan don't get it. So I think that step one is like educating everyone. And once people understand that breast milk is for babies, cow's breast milk should only be for baby cows, human beings are the only species consuming another species' breast milk, we're the only species consuming breast milk after infancy. And on top of that, we're forcibly impregnating these animals starting when they're 1 year old. Like, this is shameful and disgusting. They're having to carry their babies for 9 months, just like a human female. We're ripping their babies away from them the day they're born. The way we're getting the semen to impregnate them is horrific. And
that's not talked about enough. That's
it's
just
not
bizarre.
It's not. And I really don't know, like, the numbers. I need to do more research on it. I know, obviously, like, you can take a male and force ejaculate him over and over again, and that's what they do. And the videos I've seen of it are so, like, it's bestiality. It's absolutely disgusting. It should be 100,000,000% illegal.
It's literally bestiality. It's so disgusting.
It's horrible. I mean, and they're often anally electrocuting these cows to force them to ejaculate. Then they collect their semen, they bring it cryogenically, where they hold these female animals captive against their will. And I mean, this is you can't even put this shit in a movie. It's too bizarre and weird. Like, you can't. Who would believe this? That's why people are not understanding, because it's too weird. Who would think that human beings are taking their fist and arm and sticking them into the ass of a baby female cow who has done nothing to deserve to be violated like that? Like, that is just so horrific. And I think that people should be outraged. I think males should be upset about this industry, because they should just care about what happens to anyone. But on top of that, what's happening to the males who are used for their semen, and then what happens to the baby boys that are useless after they're born. And females should be extremely upset, because this is literally being just manipulated of the reproduction system and just having babies taken, and then the same thing happens to them. Like, this is so crazy. And I feel like, well, we said earlier, by the time someone's about 4 or 5 years old, they usually realize that they're eating dead animals. And I think that that's really sad that we're all desensitized to, like, that's just the way things are. But we are not told what goes on in the dairy industry. So my mom, when I explained to her, she was like, I think in her 60s, my dad, late 60s. And they're like, what? Like, I thought dairy cows just eat grass and make milk. I'm like, yeah, that's what I thought too. But like, I'm like, why did I think this? Because every mammal on the planet, we learned this in elementary school, makes breast milk after they are pregnant and have a baby. So why we just think, oh, dairy cows, oh, they just make milk. That's like the weirdest thing ever. And then once you just use a little bit of common sense and you think about it, it's so, like, I don't know. But I just feel like people are so desensitized with the eating of animals. This has a lot of shock value. There's just so much to it that's so disturbing. The veal industry, I know there's a lot of people who won't support, despite their other eating habits, they won't support the consumption of veal or lamb because they know that they're baby animals, and they might not realize the pigs and chickens and turkeys are also baby animals. But anyway, but yeah, I mean, these are these calves, these veal calves, they're useless to the dairy industry. And there's really, to my knowledge, not even a huge market for so-called veal anymore. I think they're often just dumped somewhere, either shot in the head and then dumped, or just literally dumped to be eaten alive or starved to death, whichever comes first, because often these farmers don't even want to waste money on a bullet. But everyone should be outraged about this. So that's why I think dairy should be the top focus. I do think that fur would be great for the other category, because they're, at least here in America and some of the other countries, there's a strong movement right now to abolish the sale of fur. Things are going really well. This should have happened back in the 90s, but people got, I think, too comfortable and relaxed, and the fur industry has revived itself here. But right now things are bad for them. They're on their way out the door. Pelt prices are not good. And so I think that is a great other focus. I think that victories are very important. I think that the victories in this sector are much more tangible, and that is really helpful for morale. So, and yeah, with just 100 million animals are used per year for the fur industry. I am not as well educated to know what portion of that is from the US, but I know that if a conglomerate like LVMH, for example, were to drop fur and announce a fur-free policy, that would affect more than just the US. So that would be really awesome.
Yeah, they're headquartered in Europe, so
yeah, that would affect a lot. So I think that would be amazing. But I think it's great that people are working on this from different angles. Like, I think it's awesome that fur has been banned in the state of California. I think it's not awesome that companies like Sea Crave violate that and continue to ship there anyway. But I think
let's hope that campaign's won by the time this comes out. I hope so.
Yeah, that would be awesome, huh? But yeah, I think that it's really Boulder has banned the sale of fur in Colorado, and Denver working on it right now. So I think that, hopefully LVMH and anybody else that's selling fur will just announce fur-free policies and stop. But in the meantime, I think it's great that it's being worked on from other angles. And that's another thing that like was, something that I learned a lot from participating in and got more experience and knowledge was collecting signatures. Really, that was interesting. And to get to be a part of things like that is awesome and tangible as well.
Usually my last question for guests is, what advice do you have for brand new animal rights activists, people who are just now coming into the movement, whether they just went vegan or maybe they've been vegan for a while, or maybe they're not even vegan yet, but they're getting started with animal rights activism. What is your advice for those people?
My biggest piece of advice is to educate yourself and continue doing that, because that's like the best ammunition, and it helps you to know what's going to help to have a better arsenal, to have more tools in your belt. And then the other thing is just like, don't get discouraged especially if you're brand new, if you do a form of activism that you don't love, or you have a conversation that doesn't go well and you get tripped up and you didn't know how to answer. Don't ever feel like you let the animals down or anything like that. Just keep learning and keep practicing and keep going and keep building your arsenal and adding tools to your belt so that you can be like a really awesome animal called a chameleon and adapt in all these different situations where the animals need you so that you can help them. I'm not like an expert in any one thing, but I try to have some knowledge in all different things that affect animals. So like, just keep learning and just keep doing what you can. And there is a lot of sadness and horrible things going on. But every time that you do something, you're contributing to the solution and not the problem. And that's what matters. And be kind to your fellow activists. We're all on the same team. And we may not always agree on everything, but I think we all have the best of intentions. So let's work together and get this done for the animals like we would want them to do if we were in their shoes.
Shannon Blair, a true hero for animals. Thank you so much for joining the Animal Liberation Hour and dropping all of this insight to everybody that's listening. And appreciate you being here.
Thank you. You're the bomb. Thanks for inspiring me so much. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you all so much for supporting the Animal Liberation Hour for another season. I can't believe it's over. Shreya and I work really hard on this podcast. We really believe in bringing all different kinds of activists into this space so that we can talk about differing views, so that we can talk about what people are doing in the animal rights movement, what successes there have been, what failures there have been. We also try to bring people on that have different views from one another. If you've been listening to the show for a while now, you've probably noted that there are people that come on here that have differing opinions, and that's okay. We want people to listen and really decide for themselves, like, what's the right way for me to be able to go. So we really hope that you've found someone or multiple people that you really resonate with and can be inspired by here on the Animal Liberation Hour. And we hope that you've really got something out of this show and this season. I want to shout out Shreya for putting together amazing interviews, and it's really just been a pleasure to listen to everything that she's put together. And I hope that you've gotten something out of all of the interviews here. Thank you so much. We really would appreciate it if you took a quick minute to rate and review this podcast. It helps others find it more easily, and the more people that find it, the more people can be inspired by the guests interviewed on our show. and hopefully we can turn that into actionable change for the animals. If you're listening on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. Our channel has educational workshops, talks, and other inspiring and informative content that you will not want to miss. At AAM, it's important for us to offer our content and resources for free so that it is accessible for everyone. If you like the podcast and all of the resources AAM has to offer and are able to support us, it is a really important time to do so. So please consider a one-time donation or becoming a monthly patron. It really helps us to keep going, and we cannot do it without you. To make a donation, you can use our Linktree, which can be found in the show notes. You can also use the Linktree to keep up with AAM on social media, visit our bookshop, visit our merch store, and keep up with everything AAM. One more reminder that you can sign up for a free mentor to help you with your activism at animalactivismmentorship.com. If you needed a sign that you should be an activist for animals, this is it. Remember that it will take all of us to achieve animal liberation. Stay focused, be effective, and keep doing your part. Until next time.